Good morning, everyone. Welcome to session A402, Learning and Culture for Better KM. We're waiting a few more moments for people to join, and then we'll get started. Okay, I see that we have a lot of participants in the room. So again, welcome to session A402, Learning and Culture for a Better KM. I'm Gloria Burke, I'm Director of Knowledge Management Strategy at Charles Schwab, and I'll be serving as your session moderator today. I'd like to ask you all to please use the chat feature to share comments and to ask questions as we go through the presentation. We're going to address them all at the conclusion of our two presentations in this session. So please join me in welcoming our three session speakers who will share their experiences and best practices in learning and culture for the betterment of knowledge management. Presenting first will be Carrie Kreshak, the Learning Experience Manager for the National Park Service. Then Aylin Sitton, who's a Senior Analyst and Instructional Designer at Enterprise Knowledge LLC, and Sarah Clark, who's a Strategic Communications Officer and KM representative for the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers and Engineer Research and Development Center will follow. So let's get started. Carrie, please tell the audience a little bit about yourself.
Thanks, Gloria. I'm going to actually divert from what you've asked and have Eileen start us off, if you don't mind, because we have a little introduction built into our slideshow, if that's okay with you.
That's fine.
Thanks. Sorry about that.
No problem.
Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and start sharing my screen. I apologize. You all are seeing my messy desktop for just 1 second. Okay, everyone, can you see my screen okay? Awesome. I'm seeing some nods from my counterparts. So I'll go ahead and get started. So hey, everybody, welcome to e-learning strategies and case studies. Today, we'll be talking about e-learning or online learning solutions, particularly taking content that is maybe in a more outdated format and utilizing technology to make it more available and findable. So we'll be exploring this through a case study, in particular, the transformation of a training program at the National Park Service. But before we begin, I'll go ahead and start with the introduction of ourselves. So my name is Aylin Sitton, and I am an instructional designer at Enterprise Knowledge. My focus areas are in curriculum design and specifically in transforming content into effective training across the mediums. And my client and co-presenter, who I've been working closely with this past year, is with me today, Carrie.
Hi, thanks, Eileen. My name is Carrie Kreshak, and I work for the National Park Service in our Learning and Development Program, and I oversee the cultural and natural resources training programs for the entire National Park Service. And a little secret about me, I am actually an archaeologist. That's what my formal training is in archaeology, but I sort of haphazardly found my way into the training world about 5 or 6 years ago and absolutely love it. So let's get started. So I just wanted to start with a little bit of background about the project. The Interdisciplinary Resource Protection and Law course, which is more affectionately known as IRPL, began in 2006, and it was offered 33 times since it was developed, and we've reached about 900 participants during those 33 offerings. And while 900 people might sound like a lot, you should know that there are 20,000 employees in the National Park Service. So, but anyways, the class was traditionally a 5-day class, 40 hours for that whole week-long class session, and it was all in person in a classroom. So I'm going to talk today a little bit about the challenges that we faced with this class and sort of the old version of that class. And then I'm going to turn it over to Eileen, and she's going to share with us the solutions that we've been working on together. First of all, the class is outdated. In the 15 years that we've been offering the class, it's only been updated twice. And this traditional 40-hour classroom experience just really doesn't fit the culture and the needs of today's workforce. And then COVID happened. So because of our traditional classroom format that this class was originally developed in, we really struggled. There were no learning products or tools that were available from the existing class that we were able to use when we switched everything over to a virtual experience like everyone had to do during COVID. So we were stuck with suspending the class indefinitely. And then there's the cost of this particular class. Having 30 students travel and 7 instructors travel and the support staff and offering the class on 3 or 4 times a year in different locations around the country, shipping all of our materials and all of that good stuff really added up, especially when you consider that we're really only reaching 90 to 120 people per year. So also, because of the format of this class, we were only offering it, like I said, 3 or 4 times a year. And it's a high demand class. It's really popular. A lot of people want to participate in it. And that resulted in us waitlisting people who were interested in joining the class. And then our wait list got so long, and we had people on wait lists for years, and sometimes people never make it into the class. So this is where we partnered with Enterprise Knowledge to help us with these problems and find some solutions to kind of get past this old version of the course and into a current solution. So what we've done is we're providing a more learner-centered and participative experience. We're adapting the existing blended learning course design and the use of technology. And then we're exploring opportunities to use distance learning to provide some of the class content. So I'm going to turn this over to Eileen, and she's going to give us a little bit more in-depth explanation of some of the solutions.
Thanks, Carrie. So this slide gives you a really quick overview of our process in how we came to our solution for this course. You can see a lot of images, lots of maps. There's a lot of background analysis to this. So to give you a bit of that background, at EK, we really felt like we struck gold with this project as it had a large amount of program documentation or content in the form of an extensive student workbook. You can see this list on the left-hand side. Lesson plans, PowerPoints, logistics. There were course evaluations over all the years and a whole library of additional reference materials, as well as a large group of instructors and former NPS participants to interview. So in our evaluation, EK and the core team with Carrie identified that this course was not only one of a kind, but through our participant and documentation analysis, we found that it housed important content that could be packaged in a way that could serve all NPS employees. Also, you add on the pandemic and all the classrooms closing, and I think we all agreed that utilizing NPS's technology and moving this course into a more online format, utilizing the tech that they currently have was the way to go. And our initial approach was to transform this 5-day in-person course into a 5 to 6 week virtual course with a couple days in the classroom for some hands-on work, because that was still needed. And that's actually not what you see here on the right-hand side on the picture. That solution was more in this loopy arrow in the middle, because the pandemic, while it was a real driving force for many organizations to suddenly move training and course offerings online, the pandemic had a very interesting and fluctuating effect across the time period of this project, right, Carrie?
Yeah, exactly. So when we had to switch our entire program to virtual, like everyone did, we experienced 2 different things that we were able to see happening. And initially, we saw virtual, what we call sort of virtual fatigue. Or, at first people were very excited about this virtual opportunities, but then day after day of virtual meetings and trainings, we started to see people getting burned out on this type of format. And then the second thing in the National Park Service, some of you may or may not know this, but when COVID happened, people started visiting parks once people could get out and about again. National parks are overrun with visitors in this country. And so our employees had to go back into the parks to support those visitors and what we provide our visitors. So those two things, the burnout, and then with having our employees having to go back into the parks, we really needed to find a happy balance on how to present this course in the future so that we could kind of meet those two things that we were seeing happening with our employees.
Yeah, so finding that balance without the burnout is a great challenge. And I'm sure some of you are nodding as, yes, I was one of those people that did go to a park for the first time or visited a new park during the pandemic. So NPS has been busy than ever. Which led us to co-design a solution on the right-hand side. And this is just a very high-level map. It's very, very detailed, but I'll break this down in the next slide. But what you see is a 2-track model. So what we did is we took all the topics of this course and created individual learning modules that now live in the NPS learning management system. And these are represented on the left part of this map in the boxes, and they're available to all NPS employees. So they are individual components. And notice that some of these boxes, like under units A and B in the first column, they're navy. So these standalone modules are stitched together for those that sign up now for this blended classroom experience of IRPL. That was our other track, is blended. So they'll take these modules as a level setting because we identified there were components in the classroom that were very lecture heavy and that could be moved online and worked on independently to now save and complete learning in the classroom with more hands-on application. Now I'm going to talk a little bit more about these two separate solutions in the next slide. So on the left, asynchronous learning, that's the first track, is fully at the pace of the learner, and it's often delivered in a virtual format. And it's especially valuable if you have an organization whose employees have incredibly busy schedules out in the field like NPS. So a participant can now take these topics, which we've created 17 course modules, they're SCORM packages. They can take them completely on their own time in the LMS and interact with an online forum if they have questions or discussion points on the topics that they learn. But an NPS employee can also find a single module if they would like, if they just want to get an introduction on a particular topic. And now on the right-hand side, like I said, if someone were to sign up for IRPL, look for IRPL, they could find this blended, which is a combination of virtual and in-person learning. So in this project, a participant would complete those 6 small course modules at their own pace and perform hands-on application in a classroom with instructor facilitation. What this did was it shortened the length of days and lecture time in the classroom. So instead of a 5-day, it's now a 3-day. And we also refreshed the instructional and student content, including lesson plans, student workbook, and guide in the classroom as well. But now that we have content living in these asynchronous modules, these modules, while they serve IRPL, can do a similar service for other courses as well. If they want to shorten their length time, or if they want if they want to cut down on some of the lecture, they could do something very similar with these modules if it applies. So that's just an at-a-glance look at the 2 tracks. I'm going to talk a bit about the results of this approach. I've kind of touched on it a little bit, and also talk about what this all means for KM. So this is an at-a-glance of the results, but NPS, starting at the top, and especially this core team, already employs a very learner-centric approach. And we just took that right into these e-learning solutions, which were a little bit newer to NPS, to improve participation, foster and personalize learning in and out of the classroom and beyond even this program. The blended learning experience resulted in shorter time in the classroom, like I mentioned, which provides that cost-saving challenge. The level setting of the virtual modules allows for more time in the classroom for practical application. Also, this course has a large group of instructors and many of them new to teaching virtually. So EK and NPS work together to upskill interested instructors to be champions of virtual facilitation. And as NPS is a federal agency, we ensured and made time for dedicated development to creating 508 compliant templates that can be reused for other similar efforts. And finally, I think this one really hits home. The reusable assets and content now can be utilized beyond just this project and is available to all NPS employees within their learning management system. So what does this all mean for knowledge management? What is the intersection between ISD and KM? Hopefully you're already thinking about this as I'm talking. But at EK, we define KM with this very concise definition that I believe resonates with a lot of you today. Good knowledge management involves the people, process, culture, and enabling technologies necessary to capture, manage, share, and to find information. And what ISDs do, or instructional designers, we go in and we just ask the couple extra questions. Do people know what to do with the information? What's the next step for them? So these standalone modules that we created for IRPL, they were designed at a very introductory awareness level. So what we did was we integrated in each of them a section for deep dives, and that's what we're calling a learn more about sort of content. So external resources and references are built into all of our modules. NPS employees can start curating their own learning path with other trainings that have been included as well that go at a much deeper dive than what these modules provide. We also included reflections. So there's opportunities for NPS employees to stop, take a breath, and see how they can apply this work to their daily jobs. Take it outside of like your computer. And we also have assessments tied to each piece. So learners can see if they mastered the concepts of the module or if they need to revisit anything again. The second question is the information in a state that produces learning. Carrie's team at NPS is already very objectives and outcomes based, like I mentioned, with their approach to developing training, and we brought that here. Learning objectives are super essential. So we started designing and refreshing the content of this course by validating the objectives first and developing or updating content around them. And I think these last two bullets and questions here are some of the things that this transformed RPL really answers. And the first one being, can the information be transformed into reusable content? I think this one's the most relevant, right, Carrie, in terms of reusability. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. So with this project, we've created a variety of learning assets. And I like to say we can mix and match those assets. So not only we're using them for this course, they can be used for other courses and also for informal learning. So really, portable, if you will.
I like that. And this last question, do people know how to transform information? When we started this project, I don't think it was really stated as a business or learning outcome for EK and NPS to create a process on transforming information this way. But I think it was like a natural, like added value that happened from it. Right, Carrie?
Yeah, definitely. So we're also able to learn from this experience. I don't think it'll take us 1.5 years to do this again, because now we have this model that we know how to use. And I think we can apply it to other similar 40-hour classes that we have. And we're going to be able to use what we've learned and be really adaptable. And we can take parts of what we've learned through this process and apply it into a lot of different situations.
This has been really interesting, but I have to call time. So if you'd like to do your wrap up.
I think we just hit time. That was perfect. I don't know how we managed that, but thanks. Yeah, that concludes our case study here. So feel free to put in chat any questions that you have. We'll be answering them at the end. To you,
Thank
Gloria.
You both. Really interesting process you put together here. Really exciting too. So next up, I'd like to welcome Sarah Clark, Strategic Communication Officer and KM representative from the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers and Engineer Research and Development Center. So Sarah, please tell the audience a bit about yourself.
Absolutely. Good afternoon. Good morning if you're on Central Time. We haven't quite hit the noon block yet, but I was having some technical issues, so I just want to make sure, can you hear me and see me okay?
Yes.
All right, perfect. Thank you. So I won't tell you too much because I actually, maybe this sounds a bit pretentious, but I have a slide about myself in my presentation. So it all works with the premise. I promise it makes sense. But just off the top, so like she said, I'm Sarah Clark. Thank you for the introduction. And there's a lot of acronyms to what I do. So actually, you know what? Can I just get rolling with my presentation? That may just be better. So that way I don't have to repeat.
Sure.
All right, perfect. So let me share my screen here real quick.
Not yet. Can you try again?
Still trying, hold on, sorry. The internet and I are not having fun today. So sorry.
That's okay. While you're fixing that, I think we have a few comments in chat. We have a lot of fabulous presentation to our presenters so far. No questions just yet. And Zachary Wall said to tell you, you've got this, Sarah. Okay, something seems to be happening here. Appreciate everyone's
awesome. Thank you so much. I think that
there you go. We could see it now, Sarah.
So just to check, it looks like
we do have an audio issue.
Okay, I can through choppy because y'all are. Okay, yeah, that's my internet today, and we're locked in a struggle. So I will I'll turn off my camera, maybe that will help. Alrighty, so I am going to take our Brian's suggestion here and try to do my hotspot. Again, very sorry for the issue. Give me 2 seconds and I'll try a different internet source.
I think this will give all of our audience time to form some questions and post them in the chat. Feel free to start, doing that now while we have some downtime.
Awesome. All righty, I'm back on a hotspot. How is that? Is that any better?
Yes.
Fabulous. Yes, I can still share my slides. Wonderful. So thanks all. Appreciate your patience there. And thanks for the comment on my title slide alone is fascinating. There's a lot to look at. So maybe I got in front of this problem and knew that y'all needed something to look at. So if at any time I'm choppy or I freeze, the chat is still working for me. So please throw something up in the chat and we'll go from there. If nothing else, I can put in my chat my LinkedIn profile and we can connect that way. So we will figure it out. All right, so let's roll through the, let's see, just making sure you can see my screen.
Yes, we're good.
All right, perfect, wonderful. So, but yeah, that's my, video doesn't want to show. That's all right. There's pictures of me in here. You'll see my face eventually. It'll be great. All right, so let's get rolling. So I am Sarah Clark. And I work, there's a lot of acronyms there. So I work for the U.S. Army, USACE, Corps of Engineers, the R&D section of that. So the Engineer Research and Development Center, and then one of 7 labs within there. So the Construction Engineering and Research Laboratory. So for the KM side of things, I am the Strategic Communication Officer. And for the KM side of things, I'm part of this wonderful group of folks here called the ERDIC Bridge Builders. So we're KM folks that each one of us is at each of the labs within ERDIC. So I'll get into a little more about our organization here in a little while as it pertains to the presentation into KM actually. So I am a sociolinguist by training and by degree. So I like to talk about identity and language and semiotics. And there is very clear, as I've been working in my KM role at Searle for about 2 years now, I see a very clear connection between effective KM and understanding how identity, language, and semiotics work. All right, so this may be a little obvious, but KM is really a complex highway. I know that lots of folks
deal with this from different perspectives, different, you know, different case studies. The wonderful case study that we were just had the pleasure of hearing from Aylin and Carrie is fantastic. And this is just kind of one of another kind of element to add into that pot. So KM is a complex highway, right? We've got, you know, how do you build the road? How do you maintain the road? To going with the analogy, how do you know what cars can go on the road? How do you know who's driving the car? How do you know what color of car they like, right? Blue, red, green, who knows? So there's all these different layers that go into making this complex highway, this knowledge flow, right? How do we enable knowledge by making sure that all these things are working? So how does sociolinguistics fit in this whole complex highway, right? So sociolinguistics, I don't typically use word clouds, but I really like this one. And I really like that it was actually made by undergrads here at a school in England, because it's very easy to understand. And sociolinguistics is kind of a niche field. So basically, sociolinguistics has to do with the interaction of language and society and how we formulate our identities based on discourse, interaction, things like that. So if you look at this word cloud, you can kind of see words that we use to talk about KM, right? Here's media, those are the tools we use, digital, news, television, things like that. But you also see kind of the things that we use, especially in the last presentation, you know, talking about education, awareness, communication, you know, all these things that kind of play into KM are also kind of these foundational things for sociolinguistics. So there's a very clear connection there. All right, so here's my identity slide that I was talking about. You'll see my face later. So I just didn't want to repeat. But so here I am, you know, part of the Briggs Builders. Now, the point of this is that I have all these symbols right next to me. They are institutional symbols. With identity comes institutions, becomes our landscape of where we've been, right? We've been, you know, institutionalized from the school system. We've been institutionalized from the military. We've been institutionalized from, you know, our culture, our ethnic background. All these things are social institutions. Now, driving these social institutions are ideologies. Now, please don't wince at that word. Sometimes we hear ideology and we think, oh my goodness, ideology, that's a them thing. That's not an us thing, that's a them, right? But ideology is just kind of a catalyst term that describes how we organize ourselves and our beliefs and all these things that go into these social organizations. So ideologies are super important. We'll talk about those a little bit later and how they relate to KM. Anyway, so back to this slide. So we form our identity based upon the memberships that we have in these institutions as we go through our life. And these become really important because we kind of pick up things from these institutions that we use to not only interact with others, but that we also use to uptake information, to share knowledge, you know, all these things that kind of relate to KM. So for myself, I've got Air Force here twice. I am a military brat of 2 Air Force retirees, and then I'm also a military veteran. I served 6 years in the Air Force. I now work for the Army, and I'm also a PhD student. So there's all these like very different you know, institutions that I'm a part of. So that's just me. I'm just the example here. Everyone has those kind of landscape here. So that becomes important. Now, I promised you that I would talk a little bit more about my institution or about my organization and also kind of link it up. So first, the overview. So I work for the Department of the Army, and I work in the science and tech enterprise, and that comprises a lot of different bodies. So we've got the Army right here. We've got obviously other organizations, but right here is my track. So the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, it's engineers, it's in the name. We primarily have an engineering mission for the warfighter. And here we're part of my lab is part of one of 7 of the ERDIC Engineering Research and Development Center. So we're kind of like the research and the development, the R&D corner of USACE. And then underneath that, we've got 7 labs. Now this is important because not only do we have a wide spread of, you know, mission, we have a wide spread of people that fit into these things. People that work for Searle, where I work, don't necessarily have the same institutional background as people who work for ITL or the environmental laboratory. This all plays out when we all try to move our knowledge, enable our knowledge, talk to each other, and also our customers and our stakeholders. So this all becomes clear when you want to, or maybe clear and maybe a challenge at times, when you want to speak to someone who's in a different institutional mindset than yourself, but you need to get this mission done, right? So I'm going to focus today on talking about two pretty divergent institutions, the military institution, as well as, or, you know, compared with the civilian institution. So there is, we like our acronyms in the military, and you can see here on this meme that I have that we've got a bunch of them, right? But in the military, we use those as packets of information to, you know, communicate. We need those to do a very intense mission at times. Now, the point for KM and how this kind of relates outside the military too, is that because these are what we call in linguistics discursive codes or diacritics that we use within the institution, they become very important, not only for our mission, but also how we communicate with each other as former military members. So they become entrenched in our identities, they become entrenched in how we communicate, etc. So you can see kind of where I'm going with this of eventually you leave the military and you become a veteran, but obviously you need to interact with civilians, right? So civilians, for the most part, they don't do the acronym thing. And that's neither here nor there, good or bad or the other thing. The point is that when you try to communicate your information, your knowledge, your mission, it kind of can fall flat, right? If you're coming from one institutional foxhole, the military, and you're trying to speak to a civilian in a bunch of acronyms, there's no knowledge transfer there. That's just not going to happen. So it's important to understand these different aspects of our identity and these different aspects of how we uptake knowledge and how we transfer knowledge. All right, so moving off of we've moved through the identity and the language piece, and now talking a little bit about the social semiotics piece. So social semiotics is at its core symbols that we use to communicate our identity, our institutional backgrounds, and we correlate with some more than others. For example, so this is an airman I'm quite familiar with. It is myself, and I served a communications mission with the B-52 bombers, this beautiful plane behind me. This is not, as you know, me just trying to show off my military service, but this red bag right here is how we do good old-fashioned military KM. And what we do for, you know, this particular mission is we have printed out knowledge management and knowledge information, and we put it in this red bag. And that's how we get it onto the plane, right? It's paper materials. It's very old school. Now, this, of course, is just one mission of the military. There's lots of parts of the military and the federal government that use a much more nuanced cybersecurity, fancy tool type, you know, this is, of course, not everybody. But the point is that this is one thing that a part of the military that, you know, you can get used to, right? Touching paper, knowing, you know, trusting the paper transfer of knowledge. The red bag is, or the red is very significant because, you know, that's how we say that something is classified. And so those semiotics of, you know, the red and how we transfer knowledge has become really important and part of your identity, part of your social semiotic repertoire that you take with you when you leave, in this case, the military. And this isn't just a military, you know, a military phenomena. This happens in other organizations all the time. And the point is that you attach to them and they become familiar to you. So understanding those and that repertoire becomes really important when you pass KM. All right, so all this to say that identity, language, ideologies, all these things make up a really complex human. Again, probably a pretty obvious statement, but you know, let's have a cliche picture to go along with it, right? So we've got this iceberg here, and everybody's seen an iceberg. The point for this is that humans, there's a lot more beneath the surface that we really need to access in order to have efficient KM, in order to have effective KM knowledge transfer. You know, we've got these ideologies we've talked about. Demographics are super important. Now that includes age, ethnicity, race, you know, all the things that make up a wonderful spectrum of society. And then of course, education And that's just not the education that you have, but that's the education that you speak in. You know, if you have a PhD that's speaking very technical to someone who is just a layperson or you know, it doesn't have that repertoire, there's going to be zero knowledge transfer there, or very little. And then of course, just personal preferences, you know, we're all unique. So all this kind of builds up here for representation and uptake capacity. So that's where the uptake capacity, we got to understand this to understand how much uptake capacity we can have. All right, so this is back, right? So all this complexity plays out here. So not only do we have little pockets of knowledge, AKA a human, with all their institutional makeups and their ideological makeups and all these things, now we have a tiered mission, an organization that is very dense, and we're trying to do a mission with military members, civilians, and veterans here internally, and also to the outside. So our mission, our stakeholders and customers are also military, civilian, and veterans. So you have to also understand how your knowledge is enabled outside of your organization as well. So it's a very dense, complex kind of structure. Oh, all right. So to sum all this up, and then I'd be more than happy to take questions and have further discussion, because I love talking about sociolinguistics and how it relates to KM. So underscoring the point is that knowledge management is for people, right? It goes beyond, you know, tools and technology and all these things, but we need to understand who is the person, the group that we're giving this knowledge to, right? Who is behind that knowledge transfer? These ideologies that we all carry with us, these institutional memberships, are extremely powerful drivers. And language is the vehicle of that ideology, specifically discourse. You know, if you've got the kind of a set of discourses that you're using, remember the acronyms, and you're trying to pass that to someone who doesn't use acronyms, well, there you go. You're kind of, your knowledge is at risk there. So demographics, of course, matter as well. Again, tools are great. Whiz-bang is great. We've got a lot of awesome stuff. This KM World Conference has been phenomenal about showing us the tools that we can use to empower those people, those knowledge management, you know, the core knowledge management folks of the people. The tools are great, right? But we need to understand how those tools are going to be taken. And remember how all these things play into the amount of uptake capacity. Because if you give someone a tool and they don't know how to use it, then, well, okay, you know, it's kind of a worthless tool, right? So these social semiotics are really entrenched. And there's a lot of examples of this in the literature, and I'd be happy to pass along if you're interested in multimodality and social semiotics. These are really entrenched things. You know, remember not only the acronyms, but also that red bag, right? I will forever see red as a classified, you know, marker of information. So these things are hard to kind of drop. And we need to understand that to know what that uptake potential is for our knowledge transfer. And so how do we, you know, all this theory is great and all this, you know, breaking this down is fantastic to talk about people, but, you know, at the end of the day, we got to produce something. How do we give these people something to transfer their knowledge with? Well, multimodal, right? We give a large menu of connection, and it really encourages not only buy-in, but also, you know, knowledge transfer. And the main message of this is, you know, meet people where they are, understand that people have different ideologies, different institutional backgrounds, and tools are great, but you got to understand who you're giving the tool to. So I really appreciate you letting me wax philosophical about sociolinguistics today and how it relates to KM. And there's my LinkedIn profile. I'll be happy to connect. And then if you want to find out more about ERDIC, of course, there's our link as well. So thank you, and I really appreciate it. I hope you all enjoy the rest of the conference and all the KM excitement.
Sarah, thank you so much for a very, very interesting presentation. Enjoyed it. So I would love to open up the chat. If any of you have questions you'd like to ask of any of our presenters in the session, please do so, and I will read them off to them. Don't be shy. This is a great opportunity to dig deep. Okay, we have a lot of people saying great job, excellent presentations. Thank you to all of the presenters today. No questions just yet. Okay, my first one. Could you speak about meeting people where they are and encouraging them to grow, explore, and expand?
Absolutely. I'll take that one first because I know it was a direct quote in my slides, but the other presenters, of course, feel free to you know, present your, or to talk about your thoughts on that as well. So meet people where they are is first understanding how to use the language, you know, that you need. I'm just kidding. But it's about first understanding that we are all unique, and that, you know, even though, you know, people work for a particular organization and, you know, they come in and they're, you know, motivated and they want to be part of the organization, that takes time for, you know, folks to switch their thinking into the ideology of what, you know, whatever organization that you're in. And so getting to know people of like, oh, wow, you work for X organization. Oh, you're a veteran. Oh, you're, you know, or you're a current service member. You know, let's say I'm a civilian and I don't understand that, you know, that ideology. We're not expecting you to, we're just expecting you to be like, oh, wow, you may have different ways that you talk about something, or different ways that you understand something. And so it really just kind of a meeting of the minds. And that's what knowledge transfer is all about, you know, enabling different ways to get that message across. So I would say, you know, to sum all that up, meeting people where they are is really finding out where they come from. It's great, right? You understand kind of where the people that you're talking to. And then the great thing is that you can come with, ask them what worked for them. Like, let's say in the military, you had, I don't know, X tool for KM, and it worked really well. And you're like, oh, hey, we could use this at this organization. You never know. So really conversations. I mean, I'm kind of biased being a linguist, but talk to people. It's awesome. You never know what you're going to find out.
Thanks, Sarah. Anyone, other panelists want to comment on that? We do have another question. I think Ryan McNally had asked Aileen in a private chat, but wanted to know if she had difficulties maintaining training materials as being strictly for training, and then separate materials for people to refer to after the training had concluded.
That is a great question. And Carrie, you can chime in whenever about this. I don't think it's necessarily difficult, but you just have to plan for it. So for us, when we were evaluating our course and trying to figure out the best fit, it's kind of looking at what your materials are and how best to meet the needs beyond the audience that we had. I mean, it definitely takes time. It takes an extra step to create those reusable assets or that material and it's, you do have to look at the material at a slightly different lens. So you are looking at maybe like Sarah was saying, every audience is unique. Every person is unique. They're coming from their own background. So when you are evaluating training materials, you do have to look at it with a slightly different lens, as this is for, in my case study, for all NPS versus this is very targeted for this particular course and this particular track. So not difficult, but maybe just takes another look or lens and maybe a couple extra SMEs to look at the materials with you.
Yeah, so Ryan's saying, thank you. I think we perhaps lack the staff to keep those two things separate.
Yeah, it does take a little bit of time and effort, but I think once those materials are created, then it's pretty easy to maintain. And if you develop them in a way where you can get that feedback easily, then you can update them easily. It just takes a little bit of extra effort in the beginning.
So Miranda on the call is asking, what are your practices to acknowledge and track calling the same term by different names or different terms by the same name? Anyone want to catch that?
I can take that one. So for example, at Searle, we have like the demographics that I talked about, veterans, military, and civilians. And I use slash marks. So I'll say what it is and then slash and then whatever the other demographic calls it. And a lot of times it's just standard practice of, if you have an acronym, spell it out and then put it, you know, in the in parentheses. And to be honest, and this is just kind of what I found in my work, is that there will be a point eventually when the acronym kind of takes, but the problem is that then you have new hires, right? So the other thing that we do, and this is just a really simple practice that has gotten great, you know, positive feedback. I just have a list of acronyms that I post on an internal SharePoint site and reference people there. And so if they don't know an acronym, go find it, you know? And so it really helps to kind of, to keep that clear. And it does have to be constantly updated, that's for sure. But yeah, you know, just recognizing, it goes back to recognizing that you do have demographics, different demographics and different institutional kind of backgrounds. And once you understand that, you can provide translations for both. So you kind of have to be bi-dialectal in your organizations to make sure that there's buy-in, because don't exclude someone just because you assume that they know the acronym or you assume that they know the other thing. And so yeah, it becomes just making sure it's an inclusive process.
And one of the best practices that I've used throughout my career is to ensure that whenever we're writing about something, that we always write out the full descriptor and then put the acronym at the very beginning of anything that we're writing. You know, define it up front. And also, I think with the intelligent search play, being able to associate words together so that, you know, machine learning understands that if you're saying an acronym, it's the same as if it was spelled out, or if it's a different term used for the same purpose. So I think as we, you know, adopt emergent technology and machine learning, it'll become easier. So we have a couple of other questions here. Rosita Jacob, my former colleague from Deloitte, so nice to see you here. She wants to know, how will we know what kind of knowledge is required at the right time, and how will this help organizations in the long run? And is this not possible without KM? Also, how important is KM in an organization?
I've talked a lot. Other panel members.
So again, you know, what kind of knowledge is required at the right time? If you could break it down into a couple of pieces.
Yeah, I mean, I know my space is very much like L&D, so it does vary a little bit, but oftentimes you just kind of take a step back. And I think when we're doing our day-to-day work and whatever we're doing, you're just taking a step back and thinking about the challenges that you're facing. And sometimes just taking a moment to identify the challenges, like we did with our case study, you can then reflect and, you know, is KM the right solution for this? You know, maybe it is something really broader on that scale, or maybe it is something smaller. But I think just taking the time to identify the challenges and how important is KM in an organization. Sarah, I don't know if you took yourself off mute, but in my experience, very important to get those just-in-time resources. I work mostly with LMSs, which is a type of CMS, which is a type of KM, but it's incredibly important to get that information out there, just to have that single source that people can go to, that can speak to an organization's mission, or, you know, their whole amount of everything that is an organization.
Well, Miranda is asking another great question here. She says she tries to design content for the person who joined yesterday. Do you follow a similar approach? If so, do you use visual or other cues to indicate specific levels?
I'll jump in on that. And it kind of references a little bit what we were just talking about, determining what people need to know. And I'll be honest, we struggle with that in the National Park Service because people are at so many various levels. So the solution that we're using currently is kind of this thought that if someone's brand new to our organization or brand new to a position or brand new to some sort of content or needing to know something, they're going to need a lot more information. I know that sounds sort of like a simple concept, but you know, those are the people that we will try to help them get to that 40-hour class or to a more extensive learning opportunity. If we have an employee who's been around for a while, they just need to kind of try to remember how to do something, or maybe there's a little additional work that they need to do that's been added to their current job. Those are the people that we target more for just helping them get maybe quick information, more informal information on how to do what they need to do. And so we're sort of always juggling or trying to, I guess, balance that, you know, the folks who need a lot of information versus people who just need something like right away. And so we try to serve both audiences, but it's tough. It's difficult to try to do, you know, everything we do and meet all of those needs, but we try.
Thanks, Carrie. So I want to acknowledge Adrian Yusta has provided a comment in the chat. He's my former leader at Deloitte, so great to see you in here, Adrian. I miss you. He's saying that this is a great discussion around acronyms and great ideas being shared, and is letting us know that Deloitte decided to go with an acronym wiki that they use to help you know, practitioners understand the vast amount of acronyms that are used across a very, very large firm. So thanks for that, Adrian. Any other questions or comments? Oh, we have one from Ryan.
I just wanted to.
Does anyone know of a software that's capable of equating terms with the same meaning? I'm sure there are many, but is anyone using anything in particular that they want to share in chat?
I think you can find a lot of corpus linguistics software and NLP software that kind of works on that. I don't work with that specifically, but I know that there's definitely corners of linguistics that have software that help. And then I know that, you know, organizations and businesses have probably morphed it into something that's a little less ivory tower. But yeah, I would try NLPs and you know, the natural language processing. Woo, my words today. And, you know, try to find those. But I wanted to just piggyback real quick on what the other presenter said is that, you know, understanding who needs deeper knowledge and who needs just a quick kind of fast food. And I think that that's part of a larger conversation of making sure that there's a good life cycle for your KM and for your workforce and your employees, and understanding at what level that people need stuff. So like a new person comes in, and going back to the acronyms, I love talking about acronyms, going back, you know, a new person comes in and they're just like fire hosed with information. And so it's better to kind of archive that and let them know just what they need to get through the first week. And then from there, building on kind of the life cycle of, you know, the KM in an organization, because a lot too soon and you're going to get, you know, glazed over eyes. And so we do that at my lab, is that we make sure that we've got kind of tiered pockets and levels of information that we give. And I can't underscore this enough. Always make sure you're asking for feedback. That is a huge part of the, you know, the life cycle of, you know, the workforce, of KM, of sociolinguistics, anything that you do. And it's something that I'm sad to say a lot of, you know, colleagues that I have in other laboratories across the Army, they don't do that. And so you know, you kind of don't get the richness of new information and how you can really help people. So feedback, 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 go get feedback.
Great. So we have about 5 minutes left. We have a couple of comments that I'll share. It was suggested that Pool Party and Synaptica do the management of acronyms well. So that's something you could check out. They're actually here at the conference, both Pool Party and Synaptica. So you might want to stop by their booth and talk with them further So thank you for sharing that information, Zachary. Appreciate it. So any other questions for our presenters today? If not, we'll give you 5 minutes back to go grab a cup of coffee and buckle down into the next session.